Up until recently, if you wanted an electric car but couldn't afford a Tesla, your options were limited to a variety of small SUVs. Times are changing, and now if you want an electric family car, you can have anything from a Volkswagen ID3, a Hyundai Kona, a Kia e-Niro, an MGV, and this, the Peugeot e-2008. Unfortunately, the Irish government have changed their mind on BEV grants, but you can still get the SEAI grant and VRT relief for full EVs. This e-2008 has a range of up to 310 kilometres from the 50 kilowatt per hour battery. As with all electric Peugeots, the 2008 looks just the same as the petrol or diesel alternative. There's a couple of differences between ICE and EV cars. You've got a blue-green tinge on the badge, there's a different coloured grille, and of course the badging on the boot. The 2008 might look a bit SUV, but it's front-wheel drive only, so don't go thinking that it has got any off-road potential. This is the Allure version, and it's one of the most popular trims because you get those cool fanged LED headlights as well as the 3D digital display. As with just about every other electric car, the e-2008 can pre-warm or cool the cabin. You input what time you're heading off in the morning, and as long as the car is plugged in, it'll get the cabin to your chosen temperature using mains electricity. It's truly brilliant for saving time on icy mornings. There are 3 drive modes too. You've got Eco, Normal and Sport. Even Eco is fine in terms of performance and throttle response, but unfortunately it turns off the car's heater. Even if you've got the pre-warmed cabin on a chilly day, it gets cold quickly. Regarding practicality, the good news is that this is a really good little family car. The boot is 434 litres, so it's a good size, and you get a variable height boot floor on all but the base trim, which is perfect for hiding all the cables. Get comfortable in the driving seat, and once you get used to Peugeot's steering wheel layout, which is different because the dials are above it, which might make you place the wheel lower than you might usually have, you will find everything at your fingertips. Once you get comfortable up front, you notice the materials are decent and the layout is modern and minimalist. The touch-sensitive buttons don't always respond, and the touch screen, although the widescreen version of this trim looks great, you do have to leave the screen you're on to change temperature. You may have to do all sorts of weird and wonderful things to find easy settings like changing the brightness of the screen, so it could be a bit more logical to use. The car's nav, though, will show you where the nearest charging stations are, which is most helpful on out-of-town journeys. The tech works well, with decent graphics and responses that are quick enough, while it backs this up with lots of standard features. You get SatNav, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. There's a decent amount of room in the back for a couple of adults, or 2 chunky car seats, and you've got decent access and headroom. When sitting a child into the seats, you may have to bend in and wrestle around with your kids and the seatbelts just a little bit, and it's a shame that there's no rear centre armrest. Unfortunately, there's no fancy sliding seats or additional versatility that you get in alternatives such as a Renault Captur, for instance. But for some context, you do get better access and a bit more leg and headroom in the 2008 than you do in a conventional family hatchback like a Volkswagen Golf. The e-2008 has a very good charging speed plug. Using a CCS rapid charger of 100 kilowatts or more, you'll get up to 80% in 30 minutes. Plug it in at home to a 7 kilowatt home charger and it'll be fully charged in around 9 hours. The e-2008 only gets a 134 horsepower electric motor, but it's still got plenty of acceleration. It doesn't feel drastically fast, but it definitely feels responsive enough, even for a mid-range burst of overtaking. Especially around town, it feels quite nippy, so you can jump out into faster traffic lanes and it feels more than comfortable, even in eco mode. The steering is a bit faster than on most alternative family crossovers. Partly because of the little steering wheel, it's got quite an eager entry into a corner, and that's good. You might need to get used to the steering feeling and the ride. It could be a little bit smoother at low speeds, But with scruffy roads, it's not too crashy or uncomfortable. It's more of a refined car. It feels stable and perfectly good on motorways. You would definitely be more than happy doing a long commute in the E2008, provided you can cover it with the range on offer. The brake regen is barely noticeable. When you lift off the throttle, it bleeds in the brakes so that it's harvesting energy, even when you're just losing speed or on the brakes. In the 2008, it's so mild, it genuinely just feels like normal engine braking in a petrol or diesel car. If you've never driven an EV before, this will feel very familiar to you. You don't really need to think about it. If you do want to up the brake regen, you can nudge the gear lever and you get B mode, which makes it quite a bit heavier, but it's still smooth and predictable, which you get used to. Either as a school run car or as a daily commuter, I think the 2008 is just a very easygoing car and a really pleasant vehicle to spend time in. If you do have a long distance commute that you're considering covering in the 2008, then you should know that the official range is a little bit off what you'll get in the real world. In a worst case scenario, you could expect some 200 kilometers of range if it's a cold day and you're on the motorway for the whole journey. However, in more varied driving and in warmer conditions, you will see more like 260 to 280 kilometers pretty easily. The bigger the battery, the further you'll tend to travel on a charge. And the E2008 is advertised as having a 50 kilowatt per hour battery, which is big compared to the Mazda MX-30s, which is only 35, but quite a bit smaller than the rivals Kia e-Niro, the long range version, which is 64 kilowatts, and Volkswagen's ID3 Performance, which is 58 kilowatts. With 134 brake horsepower, it manages a 0 to 100 km per hour time of just under 9 seconds. It's perfectly acceptable for a small SUV. It's more poke than you'll ever need around town. But over 80 km an hour, you notice that its rate of acceleration drops off quite markedly. You need to think more carefully when you're overtaking on A roads. Road and wind noise are incredibly well suppressed in the E2008, so when you're journeying up the motorway, it's far quieter than most rivals. That includes cheaper cars such as the MG ZS EV and pricier ones like the ID3. The E2008 rides better than those two as well. It's quite softly sprung, so if you hit bigger undulations at speed, this can cause a bit of a bounce, but nothing like as dramatic as the erratic DS3. There's plenty of reach and height adjustment for the steering wheel, and driver's seat adjusts for height, but it's a little narrow and doesn't come with lumbar adjustment. It can take a while to find a comfortable seating position as a result, but some of this sometimes are blamed on the 2008's steering wheel. The touch-sensitive buttons located just below the screen aren't easy to find while you're driving, but to be fair, the E2008's infotainment is still better than the ID3's, which tends to crash a lot. Storage space is still reasonable for front passengers. There's space under the centre armrest and cubbies dotted about, but the door pockets aren't huge and the glove box is decidedly small. You have to opt for this Allure trim to get a height adjustable passenger seat, and like the driver, the passenger seat isn't available with adjustable lumbar support. The rear seats don't slide as we mentioned, but they do split and fold 60-40. Unlike in some electric cars, the E2008 doesn't offer a boot in the front, but the one at the back is just as big as it is in the regular 2008 models. That means it'll swallow a reasonably sized buggy and a good amount of shopping. If you don't need a massive range, most people's journeys aren't that big on average, the E2008's range should be just fine, and it delivers decent passenger space, a good sized boot, a nice interior, and a comfy and quiet ride. But we definitely suggest looking at the Kia e-Niro or the Volkswagen ID3 as well if you need something that will travel further between charges